Okay, Linda, I'm putting together a little tutorial to show you how to remove the baseboard from your wall. I thought the easiest way to do it would be to set up a mock wall, which I've done right here. And I want to talk about the tools you'll need first. You're going to need a hammer. You're going to need the flat bar that you've just purchased. You're going to need a razor knife, but really any kind of knife will work. And of course, there's a flathead screwdriver and a putty knife. These two tools right here are just in case, and I'm going to show you why they might be important later. But let me show you how the wall works first so you'll know what you're doing on the other side of it. So when you look at your wall, this is what you're going to see. Your baseboard down at the bottom, your drywall, and then there's wood behind it. Now I'm going to come around the other side to show you how this wood works. So you have a 2x4 at the bottom, and then you have these boards coming up. Of course, these are 8-footers. They're going to go all the way up to the ceiling. These are called studs. They're on 16-inch centers. So from here to here is 16 inches, and so on down the wall. That's standard construction. However, sometimes that varies depending on where the end of the wall is and which end they start the 16 inches on. So you can't always count on that. But generally, if you can find where one stud is, you can pretty much guess where the others are because they'll be 16 inches apart on the middle of the wall. Okay, so let's come around to the front. You're trying to pry this board off, this baseboard. The reason you have to take it off is because there's this big gap at the bottom, and they can't cover that with a piece of trim. So they're going to have to put a new piece on that's closer to the floor. So you have to get this off. It's secured to the wall with little pin nails, and generally there's one nail at the bottom that goes into that bottom 2x4. So it goes through this board, through the drywall, and into this wood behind. And then generally there's one up above. So there's two at each stud. Now, that's generally speaking. Sometimes when they're putting this stuff in, they just zip right along and they're punching nails into it all along. So that's what you're trying to pry loose. Another thing that they do is sometimes you'll see there's little gaps along this top edge. So they'll put a bead of caulk along here to kind of seal that up, and you won't see the crack once it's been installed. So what you're going to have to do before you start prying this off is you're going to want to take the razor knife. You're going to want to put it right in that edge. You're going to go all the way along so that that blade cuts any paint or any caulk that's in that gap. And the reason why that's important is when you start to peel this piece loose, if it's glued at this top edge with caulk or paint, it'll peel this paper off and it'll tear it right up the wall. And that's one of the things that the contractor's concerned about when he takes it off. So before you do anything else, you want to use this razor knife and cut it right along this top edge. Be careful because you don't want to go up the wall. You damage it. You want to stay right along that top edge. Just stay in that groove. You don't have to cut deep. You're just trying to get through that little layer of paint. Okay, once you've done that, your pry bar comes into place. This is a little bit hard to do because I only have two hands. So you're going to take your pry bar. If you know where a stud is, you're going to want, see where the wood is behind me? You're going to want to put it between the drywall and that top edge. And it's going to be tight against there, so you might have to use a hammer to tap on this top part and drive it down in there. And then you can pry it loose. It shouldn't be hard to come off of there. It should come off really easy. The problem is if you start prying in between where these studs are, you can break this drywall. Because when you start to put pressure on it, this board isn't going to bend, but the drywall behind it's going to break. So you'll want to try to get where the studs are. It may be possible for you to use the hook on the end of this pry bar and get underneath this edge and pry it loose that way. But you have to be careful that you're not prying into the drywall underneath it because you don't want to damage that. So my guess is the best bet is to work from this top edge. Drive your pry bar down into there and gently pry it loose as you go along. Now, if you happen to have a spot where you don't know where a stud is and it feels like the wall's bending behind it, you can take this putty knife, put it up here on the drywall. Maybe you can use it to pry it loose a little bit because this is wider. It won't damage the drywall. Or you can get that down in there and then take your pry bar and put it in here. And because this putty knife is in here, it'll help spread out the pressure and it won't bust through the drywall. So using those tools, you should be able to work your way around and pull it all loose. Now, it may be that some nails will pull out of this board and remain stuck in the wall. I wouldn't worry about trying to pull those out. They were probably put in with a nail gun. They'll be hard to pry loose. And they can probably just bend them over or snip them off when they put the new baseboard in. So this should guide you through the process. It's pretty simple once you get started. You just want to be very careful that you don't damage this drywall board. That's what they're concerned about, and you want to be careful of that as well. All right, hopefully this helps you. Make sure you cut it with a knife first. Use your tools, go easy, and it shouldn't be any problem. And of course, I'll be available at 7 o'clock if you have questions beyond that. Hope this helps. Thanks. Bye.